Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. I don't actually have a traditional silly intro joke for him, but he's freshly back from his honeymoon, so congrats Matt, and everyone give him a warm welcome back. It's Matt Morgan. Hey dude.
Well, thanks Joey. It was nice. I had a warm welcome on our honeymoon and it came back and it was a little chilly, but I do have some good news actually. So a friend of mine, he just got his PhD in the history of palindromes. So we now call him Dr. Awkward.
Okay. What an
There you go.
Okay, cool. Honestly, I love palindromes, but I am always a little bit sad that the word palindrome is not itself a palindrome.
It's very misleading of a title, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Matt, it's the two of us on this episode, and bro, we're talking about that last game of the night. Where there's like maybe an hour left, maybe 50 minutes left of game night, and you don't want to waste it. And you're like, can we get one last quick one in? But then sometimes everyone agrees, yeah, we'll play a quick one, and then it turns out to be a 2-hour slog after all. We want to talk about that.
That's like the famous last words of, do we have time for one quick game?
Yes.
It's never one quick game. So, yeah, I do agree. I love getting that last game in there, but I think over the course of however long, the 10 years almost that we've been doing this show, we've learned a few things, I think you could say, when it comes to how do you pick decks for certain situations. And the situation of it's last game of the night, like you said, you have to be kind of specific with those decks that you're picking out.
Yeah, how do we avoid that the final game problem? How do you pick things that are going to be properly proactive, and so that you don't accidentally fall into a grind fest as the last thing of the night?
Those are the worst, yeah.
And they're fun at the beginning of the night, but I don't think they're fun at the end of the night when your mental acuity has completely tanked. You want to pick something that is pretty straightforward or that is going to get the job done and actually fall more comfortably within those the time constraint that it turns out that you probably have. Well, and how is it that you do that?
Well, the worst thing that happens too is there's always the last game of the night. The magnified version of this is it's 5:00 on Sunday at a MagicCon. What deck are you going to play? That's when you were the most tired. Like everybody's been playing all weekend or all night, whatever that is. Like there's always these situations that are going to come up whenever you're playing that you have to pick the right deck. Otherwise, you're just going to be miserable going through all of that.
And an ironic part of this too is that I think when those moments happen, when everyone agrees, yeah, we'll play fast, when everyone pulls out one of their best decks, super powerful stuff.
Which is
because
great.
You assume, yeah, that is a good starting point. But when everyone does that, it kind of has the accidental counterbalancing effect of if everyone's playing something powerful, then everyone's also able to punch back against the other powerful stuff and remove the important things over there. And then you could accidentally still wind up in a slog fest anyway. And so it isn't just an issue of power. There are some other details that matter when you're choosing which deck you'll use for these last game of the night situations.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into them because I think we can break this into what do you want to avoid and what do you want to look for when it comes to how you're picking those decks. I think let's get started with how to prevent that from happening and what do you typically tend to avoid is probably where we want to start. I think the number one consideration that I have when I'm going into these last game situations is I will not play control. That is absolutely the first thing I look for is is this my Council of 4 deck? That's a pretty control-y slow deck. Let's not do that.
Yeah, strategies that take a long time to unfold, and control decks famously are removing stuff quite a whole lot on other people's boards. It was just removing proactivity from the game and pushing you a little bit farther away from an endpoint. It's pushing you towards the endpoint that you want, but that endpoint is going to be at turn 10 compared to other people who are trying to make things end on turn 8. And those last few turns of the game, they get exponentially longer and longer. Those final rounds of the game can take half an hour compared to the first couple turns of the game. So control pushing that finish line even one more round into the future does add up some extra time. I experienced this. You mentioned your Council of 4. I experienced this when I had a Kaneo Sentiro group hug deck.
Yeah.
Which group hug, you'd think that giving more people resources would be the kind of thing that promotes a shorter game.
Yeah.
But in group hug, you're also trying to police, they can't run away too far with all of the extra stuff that I'm giving them. So it did actually secretly end up being a little bit more of a control deck, and I learned fast not to play that one as the last game of the night.
So this podcast, we're kind of getting bottom of the barrel when it comes to topics, apparently, because we say, how do you avoid grindy decks or grindy games? And the answer is avoid grindy decks. That's the source of our advice right now. But it applies to more than just like, don't play the grindy decks. Like the decks that are intentionally trying to not just accrue value, because grindy can mean a lot of different things, but like decks that intentionally slow the game down as much as possible, which is why we say like the hard control, just don't do that.
Yeah, a Baral deck with a whole lot of counter spells, that's not proactive. I would say also commanders that, like when you're doing their thing, they lead to a lot of removal happening. I'm thinking of like Judith Connoisseur here, which gives all of your instants and sorcery spells death touch. And then you're going to play a lot of those red spells that deal like 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. That's a really cool synergy. It is also removing a lot of creatures from the board. And that is not a proactive thing. That is a very defensive maneuver. And that's going to also be the type of thing that extends the game. So like those could be other things to look for, as well as there are a whole lot of removal that is encouraged by the commander is another way to identify this.
Yeah, very much so. I think along these same lines too is like, unless you're playing like a CEDH level, stacks is probably not the answer for getting a quick game in either, because that any strategy that inherently just like tries to slow things down or put them to a complete halt. I know Enchantress decks suffer from this pretty easily almost, just because like they're going to put up pillow forts, they're going to play stuff like Suppression Field, Sphere of Safety, a bunch of those types of cards that intentionally reduce interaction, and those I would certainly say fall under the control sphere for the sake of this argument.
Completely. I would also wager that like Super Friends kind of falls into a similar camp there, because here's another thing to attack, and therefore people stop attacking life totals as often. The presence of several planeswalkers could also be the kind of thing that accidentally leads to people aren't pushing towards the finish line because they're trying to remove your other thing over there. I think it kind of has that. It's like it's in a defensive stance from the get-go. That strategy feels like it is.
Well, and Super Friends, I think, not just for being a control deck, but kind of plays into the next bullet point I would say that we want to encourage people to avoid, which is cards or decks that would take excessive game actions, or just there's a lot of different decision trees, because Planeswalkers, it's not just that you're playing one Planeswalker and you're activating that ability once. It's you're playing 4 Planeswalkers and activating them each turn, and that's a lot of decision trees, and then making sure you sequence it right. So decks that take a bunch of game actions like that definitely are the types of decks that I would encourage folks don't save till the end of the night.
Yeah, one of the quickest types of things that you can do in a game is just I tap my mana, I play this thing, and this thing does this one move, and then that's it. It's just like, cool, I play this and I pass. Compared to, I play this, and now I'm also going to, let's see, uptick this over here. And then I think with this one, I'm going to downtick it and target, let's see, what should I target with this -2 ability? Like, that's the kind of thing that over time is exponentially just going to add up like a whole lot. So Super Friends especially fall into this. The decision trees point that you made for sure is really involved there. A more straightforward strategy that is just like play, go, is going to inevitably lead to something much faster than something like Super Friends or cards that are hypermodal.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we've got a few more points that we want to talk about, but let's get some shout outs out of the way first, Joey, because I know we got to thank some people, so we may as well get this out of the way.
Heck yeah. We are proud to be sponsored by Dragon Shield, who make amazing card sleeves, and they recently announced their new line of sleeves featuring officially licensed Magic art, including from Tarkir Dragonstorm, the Ur-Dragon, and a bunch of new amazing, really beautiful Fetchland art too. Dragon Shield also have this amazing card scanner app for you to easily sort through and find the value of cards in your collection. It is a super great tool. They even carry custom EDHREC sleeves if you want to check those out. So if you want to get some amazing new stuff from Dragon Shield, use promo code EDHREC, all lowercase, when you check out to get a discount as you get your new Shieldy sleeves. Again, that is code EDHREC, all lowercase, and thank you so much to Dragon Shield for sponsoring the show.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support the show, you can also do a bunch of free things that just help us out in so many different ways. And the big one, just subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to your local podcast app, make sure you leave reviews, like our videos. It helps and goes so much further than you know. But if you would like to, you can also head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast, where it's a nice way to get yourself a little something in return for supporting us over on Patreon. Something like tracking all of the challenges stats that we've done over the years. We've been doing this for a while, which means there's a lot of historic data that we've picked through. And if you want to see all of our challenges over the years, you can get access to that spreadsheet and more over at patreon.com/EDHRECast, including getting into the running where we give a very special shout out to a very special patron every single week. So this week, we're going to give a big thank you over to Ben Wellman, who was a very well-to-do man by going to patreon.com/EDHRECast. So Ben, thank you so much for all of your support. We definitely appreciate it.
Ben, thank you. Okay, Matt, let's get back into things here. We were talking about some stuff that takes like a lot of excessive game actions. And so things that were hypermodal is one expression of that. I would also argue that like excessive shuffling is kind of another. Like, I'm sorry, landfall players out there. Landfall decks can be very powerful, but if you're cracking a fetch and then also playing this other land searcher or something like that, that's a lot of loading screens that you've accidentally just injected into the game, and that can also be the type of thing that adds up a little bit of extra time on the chess clock.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shuffling just by nature takes a little bit of time. You pause the game. And so there's a lot of shortcuts that you can do to kind of speed that up, like shuffling. Okay, sure. I'm going to I'm going to do this at the end of my turn, but like in theory, I'm going to pretend like I'm holding priority and doing this at the end of your turn. Just give yourself a chance. And if that's a practice your play group gets into, that helps a ton. But still, there's a lot of shuffling that might be happening on every single person's turn. So straightforward decks, I think, definitely are the way to go there. Another thing along this excessive game actions or just excessive things that you have to track is counter decks. +1/+1 counters.
Girl,
so I learned I learned the hard way. My Tom Bombadil deck is not a deck that I can play at the end of the night. My Coma deck is definitely not the type of deck I can play towards the end of the night because it's so many little game actions. Just like it's a little thing here, it's a little thing here, and there's always something going on. So just anything that just has to factor in a whole bunch of one thing, definitely don't do that either.
Particularly because it's not even just like, here's my cardboard. It's here's my cardboard, and now I'm going to resolve these. So I'll take up this dice and like, all right, I gotta find the ones moving from a 2. Where's the 2 on this thing? Like even little stuff like that. Like it's the type of stuff that can add up over time. And like a Saga deck is exactly the type of thing where that is expressed, because it takes so much time to resolve each of those, and not just to resolve them, but also to move the dice on them, which doesn't sound like a lot, but with enough triggers over time, it can become a lot.
Oh, and it adds up so quickly. Like it used to be, it was just Super Friends decks that are the type of thing that has a lot of decision trees. You have a ton of decks now, like Saga decks. Like that, again, my Tom Bombadil deck, it took me probably like 5 or 6 games to really get into a good play pattern of, okay, I'm going to sequence these. I'm always reevaluating. I have to look at every single chapter, but then when I pass the turn, I'm looking at the next chapter on all of my different sagas, and I'm trying to plan my turns out ahead of time. Like it took me a while to even get semi-okay at playing that deck every single time. And so definitely I would say like anything that just requires a bunch of management of your resources,
little fiddlies.
Steer clear of those. Yeah, little fiddlies. Yeah, we'll call them that.
I mean, because like my example for this would be, have you ever resolved a hawkball trigger? Have you ever resolved a hawkball trigger?
No, I intentionally haven't built that deck because I don't want to manage those triggers.
It's so powerful, but every merfolk you control exploring, and you're looking at the top card and deciding, do I keep this? And even if you do decide to keep it and you're just like, I'm just going to add the +1 counter to each of my stuff, that's still, all right, let me change the number on every single die on each one of my merfolk. And that is so tedious. It does. Yeah, it just adds up a little bit of extra time. And if you do have just like, the 45 minutes left to play, maybe that's the type of thing to avoid so that you're not accidentally taking up time in the game by by just trying to execute upon a single game action.
Yeah.
Chaos decks, by the way, really big example of this. If things have to be chosen at random.
Nope.
Stuff like resolving a scramble verse or trying to get out from a planar chaos. Total time suck.
Get out of here. I will kindly uninvite you to the next game night.
I want to get to something that you mentioned earlier. I think you had mentioned Coma, which is like doing a whole lot of things on other people's turns as well as your own. That's another detail too. If you have a deck that is proactively trying to like it is contributing proactively to the game, but it is also like interrupting other turns, that can also sometimes add some extra time. I'm thinking of like a Miss Bumbleflower here.
Yeah.
Like you're very encouraged to do stuff on other people's turns. And that is just also the kind of thing that makes the game a little bit less straightforward. Very dynamic, very fun commander. But in terms of like last game of the night qualities, it's not what I would personally look for.
Well, anything that just requires you to constantly say in response. And I understand the game is super complex. And sometimes, Joey, you're going to try to alpha strike to end the game. And I'm going to have to, in response to you giving it double strike, I have to kill it. That's going to happen. But you want to minimize how often you have to do that. So there's a difference between needing to do that and you have to do that.
And I would also say as well, like those types of things, when you have a whole lot of those instances, even you are wondering when it is that you'll pull the trigger. As well. That's kind of the other thing too. And that is a lot of extra mental that you're putting onto yourself. And maybe your bandwidth is a little bit smaller at the end of the night. So it's also just about respecting how much brain power do I have left when it comes to decks like that too, is kind of a thing to be aware of.
Well, and that's less picking the right deck, but picking the right time to play those decks. Because
There you go.
if you're tired, know yourself. Know that like, okay. And Dana does a really good job at this. Dana's like, okay, I am not playing any of my Golgari decks towards the end of the night because I know that Glissa the Trader is going to take forever because there's a lot of triggers going on.
Right.
Keep in mind like how well you do with certain decks too, because that's going to make a huge difference too.
Yeah, I think that's a very big part of the conversation is like recognizing your own capabilities once you're a little bit fried because it's been a lot of decision making all day.
Well, I mean, definitely within my capabilities, same thing is I love my Council of Four deck, but that is absolutely not a last game of the night type of deck because the big thing that I struggle with that is there's a lot of theft happening in there. It's a slow control deck, but also I'm doing a lot of, I'm casting a bribery, which means I have to go through somebody's deck and I have to read all their cards and I have to go through like, what do I want to steal? That deck in general, just like there's so many, even though it's kind of a group hug, it speeds up the game. In theory, it doesn't really because I have to read every single card and see if like what I want to do about it.
I would actually totally submit that like the strategies that are built on stealing other people's cards, the Gaunties of the world, that's a lot of extra stuff to read and to try and force to work within your strategy and to try and construct a win condition out of. That's adding a lot of extra just like decision trees there too, even though it may not immediately feel like it. Plus, last game of the night, you don't want to forget to give people their cards back. So that's probably the kind of thing I play earlier in the night just for that reason, because I want to remember it before I leave the venue, you know?
I recently had a friend who I was playing with them and they left one of my cards in there because they stole a card of mine. They had to mail it to me back because they don't live close to me.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. If you are playing a last game of the night, give yourself some time to give people their cards back. Because you absolutely, that was such a weird feeling. It was like, hey, I'm in Minnesota and I found your card. Do you want it back now? And so I was like, yeah, please mail it back. So it was a funny situation. So yeah, don't do those at the end of the night.
I think I'll also put in, we kind of hinted at some strategies earlier that take some extra time, things that are removal heavy. Like I swear the third or even the fourth board wipe of a game is just like, oh my word, like no. But
slow roll. Like you just because it's in your hand doesn't mean you have to cast it.
There's also that. Not gonna lie. But I was actually also going to put forward even strategies like mill. Like the finish line is a little bit different than the usual finish line, so that's the type of strategy that could also accidentally be like, it's kind of going a little bit longer, unless you're deliberately doing like a combo mill type of strategy. For instance, mill is a bigger number that you're working on solo compared to everyone else just attacking each other. So that's a little bit of a different creature. And frankly, even like life gain strategies.
Yeah,
life gain makes the number go the other way. So there's also that might be the kind of thing that I would be like, I'll play life gain first rather than last.
The life gain was what jumped into my head when you were talking about mill, how like you move the goalpost a little bit. Well, how about always moving the goalpost? Because that sounds miserable. So like if you're playing a life gain deck and like you don't have an Aetherflux reservoir in your deck, maybe don't play that towards the night because people can get you close and then, I just gained 50 more life, so try again next turn. Like that's the worst type of feeling. It just creates the social situation where unless there's somebody's trying to win by commander damage, chances are they're just not going to beat you.
Actually, mentioning commander damage there, that's kind of an interesting point here as well. I think that there's potentially an issue with if your commander is like a huge linchpin to your strategy, that could also potentially be a problem with those last game of the nights. Like if it's all eggs in one basket and one way, and then that's easily removed by one card from another person, and it takes you a long time to rebuild. Then you are also removed from proactive status in the game too.
Yeah.
Game too. So something like a Voltron deck is especially susceptible in that way. And I wonder whether that might be the kind of thing that feeds into my decision points as well. I'm not saying that it's like always going to be bad, but the more that your commander is a linchpin, the more weak you are to a silver bullet. And silver bullets can famously take you really far out of the running, at which point you're just going to spend a whole lot of time top decking or something like that, and not being able to contribute to everyone else, like making life totals melt down and stuff like that.
So I had a experience, actually, Joe, you were in this game too. We were playing with Dana on stream, and I was playing my Valduk deck, which was all about equipment. It's mono red. Well, Dana was playing a Pestilence deck that held up a lot of mana, and so like it effectively took me out of the game once Dana got set up. So that absolutely did lead to a pretty, for me at least, pretty miserable game. Granted, I also think that that was several years ago and several generations of card design ago, where
sure.
I'm much better at being a deck builder too. So I think people are a little bit better. And also that was like super matchup specific. Like if it would have been any other deck of Dana's, it probably would have been very different. So I agree that, sometimes those linchpin strategies make sure that just like people aren't kind of effectively counterpicking you when it comes to deck selection. Like if that does happen, I think in retrospect, I could have handled that game better. It's like, okay, if you're going to play your Pestilence deck, let me play something else, because otherwise like I just don't get to play. And I think that was not so much a miss on the commander selection, but just like we should have talked more, especially because like that game was on stream. That probably didn't lead to great gameplay watching either.
That potentially, sure, yeah. I'm kind of like recognizing my own, like what is a deck that's very susceptible to the Silver Bullets thing, and I kind of wonder that like Will Health sort of falls into this. Like if someone does land the Graveyard 8 very effectively, I'm pretty far out of the running, and that's a deck that is also a lot more gradual in its win conditions in the first place, so it is like becoming harder to push the game to that point where we all want it to end quickly. Like that was the condition that we all set. So that's also potentially the kind of thing that I'd second guess at the very least. I'd be like, do I have something else that might fit the occasion a little bit better, that isn't going to be quite as susceptible to things that will knock me out of the running and prevent me from contributing to the end point that we all agreed we wanted to happen faster.
So do you think it's more a question of don't play decks that lose to Silver Bullets, or do you think it could be more make sure you're not playing a deck with a bunch of Silver Bullets in your deck at the same time? Like if I can play a Torpor Orb and I completely shut down somebody's like
a blink
Flicker deck. Then like surely that wasn't so much on them trying to play their deck as I happened to cast and put out this one thing that was going to shut them down. I think Drannith Magistrate, I think, is a really good example of a type of card that you might want to steer clear of in those last games of the night, because again, it's kind of a stacks piece. It's going to slow the game down and prevent people from doing things in a way that slows the game down significantly, versus a group hug that's at least enabling people to do more things versus stopping them from doing it altogether.
I get what you're saying there. I definitely think that is going to be a bigger portion of the conversation, is like how much of the removal and the Silver Bullets in my own stuff. But I still want to be sensitive to like my own all eggs in one basket type of strategy. Even if I'm playing like a deck that is like getting a whole bunch of elves into play or whatever, that's really cool. But if that is a deck that also positions itself in such a way that a single board wipe knocks me out of the game completely, and then it's really hard for me to rebuild and contribute to the game ending more quickly, that's the type of thing that I would, at the very least, have a moment of reconsidering whether that's the thing that I want to pick. Is like, how susceptible am I to even basic removal stuff like a single board wipe? Or if my commander gets removed, does that really shut me down and it's hard for me to get back in? Actually, my commander deck serves as a really good example of that. It's a very silly deck. I keep it deliberately very bracket too, but it is hyper dependent on the commanders being in play for the backgrounds to even work in the first place, you know? Yeah. And so if all that an opponent has to do is be like, cool, Sword's your guy, and then that really shuts me down and I'm not contributing as much with the rest of my card pool, that's the type of energy that I'm trying to go for. So a lot more of column A than column B, but I'm still, wanting to be attentive to column B.
Yeah, for sure. I think in my mind, maybe the last bullet point here, that it really just leads to a really sour last game experience, is going to be cards that have synergies, but it's not infinite synergies. And especially if they're like not deterministic synergies.
Leap of faith type of plays. Like when do I pull the trigger? You're constantly evaluating those things and you're not sure if it's actually going to get there. Sure. Yeah,
I think a good example of this is Raga Draga. And so that deck has a lot of creatures in there that have the tap to add mana equal to this card's power. Well, Raga Draga's ability, once I start like casting and chaining together multiple cards that are going to trigger that ability on Raga Draga, it untaps that mana dork and makes it even bigger. And it's really fiddly. It leads to what was it? How did you characterize these things? Like the Fiddlies, that one. Yeah. Deck becomes that, and like otherwise it could have been a really straightforward aggro deck. But I think this is definitely an example of a card that like, okay, it's doing the thing, but it's not infinite, so it doesn't end the game itself. It just kind of leads to one big turn, but that turn takes forever. It just bogarts all the time that people have at the table.
Sure. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned this, because sort of a sister to this, it isn't just that like, oh, these things might be non-deterministic. I'm taking a whole lot of game actions and we're not sure if it's actually going to like get there, in which case does it feel like I spun my wheels a little bit. But you've mentioned like non-infinite combos. Ironically, like an infinite combo deck is actually a great thing to pick for the end of the night in terms of the cleanliness with which it just definitively ends the game. That does achieve the thing. But the other ingredient of this too is that the note that everyone wants the final game of the night to end on. The way that the last game ends, was everyone satisfied by it? And some people, may not enjoy combo as much. They might not be an exciting finish to the night. So potentially that's another thing to pay attention to as well.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, what's a deck that has a win condition that isn't just quick, but also is exciting, or everyone's kind of like, all right, cool. Like, as opposed to something where it's just like, oh, well, I guess they won in the boring way, or whatever might run through someone's mind, But that's more of a like playgroup specific thing than anything else. But
I think
just
that's
like also in my mind.
Yeah, playgroup specific and bracket specific. So if you're playing brackets too, no matter what, I mean, Joey, I know that you and I, when we play, like, combos are on the table for sure. Like, we don't love doing it ourselves, but like if somebody does it, no hard feelings. You did what you wanted to do. Yeah. I think if we're playing at brackets too, that's where we're going to be like, I don't know about that. That's kind of uncouth. So it largely depends on the playgroup. Largely depends on what brackets you're trying to do and what kind of game is everybody. Are we trying to do again this last game of the night, super sweaty type? Let's just get this game and like hopefully it ends quick, or are we let's just explore, let's have fun.
Yeah. Are there any other decks of yours that you look at? You've named a couple of examples so far of decks that you're just like, oh, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't play this. Are there any other examples that come to mind for you before we wrap up from this, what we personally would avoid in a final game? Any other stuff come to mind? I
think the only deck that I haven't had a specific ask for or a specific time to call it out, but I definitely don't like to play it towards the end of the night, is my Vivictus Asmati, the Dire deck.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Turns out, like if you kill the best thing for everybody on the board, that's going to slow the game down significantly. And then like also you have to worry about spending time. Okay, everybody flip the top card. And then oftentimes there's going to be ETBs. There's going to be things that have to resolve from there. So the combat step with Vivictus can take a little bit of time. And I played it in Las Vegas. Thankfully, it was the first game of the day, not the last game of the day, because otherwise it could have been kind of a slog.
Yeah, I like that because his ability is like really cool, like chaos warping stuff, but you are removing things and resolving the effect also takes a while, like the hawkball thing that we described earlier. So that's a really good
same
example.
Effect.
And again, it's not like these decks are bad ones to play ever. That's not what we mean. It's just maybe not the mood for the final game of the night if there's a time constraint. That's the angle here. So that's a great 100%. Example. I like that a lot.
They're definitely decks that like they're fine to play, and I have the decks for a reason. They're fun to play, but they're decks that I want to play when I don't have a time constraint. That's a good way to put it, Joey. So what about you? Are there any decks that you haven't got a chance to talk about that you definitely don't play towards the end of the night?
Yeah, I have my bracket one Marina Vendrell Haunted House theme deck, and it's very silly. But since the win conditions are so slow because the deck is doing a meme thing more than anything, like I'm not going to end the game with that, especially because there's a lot of reading. Half the cards in that deck are two-sided, so there's more extra decision trees there too. And it makes a lot of counters and tokens, and the win cons are just not very definitive. They're not like I push this button and I'm definitely slamming the let's go, game's about to end type of button. It doesn't really have that capability either. That's a pretty obvious example, though, because it's so deliberately trying to be a bracket 1 type of deck. In terms of something that I think is actually a bracket 3 type of deck, actually, my Yannette deck is probably what I would put forward here. That's, playing stuff off the top of my library. Very cool, very neat to cheat huge stuff into play. But it's also in terms of like the mental acuity point of like I have to keep track of like which cards are where, and also there's a lot of shuffling. And the commander, she's a little bit of a linchpin. I do kind of depend on her to make that effect actually I get the proper payoff as well. So it's got enough of a confluence of some of the stuff that we just described that I'd be like, maybe she stays there instead of being the last thing, because I might not have the brain power to really do her justice. I should probably have played her earlier. I think that's one that I would put forward as that example.
Yannette is definitely the type of deck too. Like there's a lot of game actions that you have to go through and a lot of hoops to jump through in order to make sure that she is doing the thing that you want her to be doing. So I definitely both of those decks actually, because your Marina deck, it takes a while just to narrate what's going on as you take your turns even. So
because I like being like, when here's this fancy, we're in the study, which is like a crappy land that I put in there because it looks like a house.
You can't expect a storyteller not to tell the story. That's basically what I'm getting here.
Way to call me out on this podcast here, Matt. Way to call me out in front of so many people. Thank you for that. All right.
They already knew that about you to begin with. You're fine.
Well, with egg thoroughly on my face, I think that now we take a break from this part of the conversation. Those were some of the things that we obviously would seek to avoid. There's probably a lot of stuff that we covered there. I don't think it always means you definitely have to avoid it so much as it is just like watch out for these things when you've got that final game of the night with the time constraint. But there are also things that we want to talk about that are very proactive that we seek with, like, what are the things that we're actively looking for? And that'll be part 2 of the show. But first, before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause for Challenge the Stats. There's a whole lot of data on EDHREC that we don't always agree with, so let's challenge those numbers. This episode is brought to you by Archidekt, the very best commander deck building website. We house all of our decks on Archidekt, which you can find linked in all of our episodes, or go to archidekt.com/EDHRECast. And by now, you've probably heard of my favorite feature on Archidekt, dragging and dropping directly from Scryfall or EDHREC right into your deck list, saving you tons of time on typing out your card choices when you're updating your list. And you probably also know that Archidekt's playtester is the very best in the biz, smoothly starting each new turn with a swift draw and untap, easily grouping and tapping things en masse if you need it, making searches and scries super simple, proliferating a bunch of counters with just one click of a button, and more. But did you also know about its playtester logs feature? Archidekt can track stats during your playtests, noting such data as your number of cards drawn each turn or number of mana producers played each turn, so you can see how often you're hitting your land drops or how many extra cards that you draw, and on what turns you're most likely to start drawing extra cards. I just playtested a +1 counters deck to see how much total power it could accrue on the field, and Archidekt tracked for me that I got up to 48 power by turn 6. Such easy access to a detailed recap of your playtests can help you get in tune with how your deck really works, or help you locate its weak spots, and all those little edges and extra bits of knowledge could make all the difference to make you more successful at your next game night. Check out our decks at archidekt.com/EDHRECast, that's ARCHIDEKT.com/EDHRECast, and thanks again to Archidekt for constantly innovating and for sponsoring the show.
All right, Joey, I'll get us started here. So we had somebody send us in an email who just goes by No Funds, and they had a really good challenge that I think we're kind of latched onto a little bit. So No Funds said, I want to write in challenge stats for the inclusion of rotating fireplace in proliferate decks, namely in Techothal Inquiry Dominus decks. It is a legendary Phyrexian horror. It's 2 blue for a 3/5 legendary Phyrexian horror with flying. And it says, if you would proliferate twice instead, then you can pay 1 and 2 Phyrexian blue mana to remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control to put an indestructible counter on Techothal. And the synergy that we're playing up here in this challenge is Rotating Fireplace. It's 3 mana for an artifact from the Doctor Who set, and it says Rotating Fireplace enters the battlefield tapped and with a time counter on it, and then you can tap it to add an additional colorless mana equal to the number of time counters on Rotating Fireplace. So No Funds goes on to say, having a mana rock that can scale with every proliferate makes it a tremendous difference in so many of my own games, and I want to add as many as I can. Just about everybody knows about Everlasting Chalice and Astral Cornucopia. The Command Zone recently pointed out how good Pentad Prism can be, but I don't see anyone running Rotating Fireplace outside of dedicated suspend decks. You can just compare it to Empowered Auto Generator in a third of Techothal decks that costs 1 more mana and takes an additional turn to start going. That first counter getting spotted for you makes a world of difference. Not that I'm about to cut the generator either. And this is an absolutely good point. So from No Funds, I really like this challenge. This is a really good way to have something that comes out with a counter on it already, which is kind of the appeal, I would say, of Astral Cornucopia, Everlasting Chalice, because they come out and already have that counter on them that you can start proliferating right away in many times versus the Empowered Auto Generator that you have to tap, which then puts the first counter on it. So if you really like these and are going to be proliferating a lot, it makes sense why Rotating Fireplace is one of those ramp up type of artifact, mana rock type of cards where it's going to have that time counter on there. You're going to start proliferating it, and by the time you untap it, there's going to be times where you're going to be able to tap it for 3 or 4 mana right away, just because you have Techothal in place, you have the counter to start you off on the right foot. So No Funds, thank you so much for your challenge. I really like this. And you're right, this just isn't getting played at all in really any decks and not really showing up on Techothal's page at all. So really good challenge.
Yeah, if Everflowing Chalice can show up in 85% of Techothal decks, and Astral Cornucopia can show up in 78% of them, and this is, maybe not as good a version as each of those, but still in the same discussion of it, I'd say that his numbers can punch up closer to where those things are aligned to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really fun one. I like that a lot. For challenge stats on my end, I I would like to talk about Toph the First Metalbender. The Avatar set is not officially out, but we have seen a lot of early data for Toph because she was previewed a while ago, and people are tinkering online with her already. We have over 3,000 decks in the database for Toph so far. This is really neat. Naya Commander, a very powerful one from what it's looking like. Toph turns all of your artifacts into lands so that she can earthbend them, which is super cool. However, she does specify that she's turning them into lands, but she's not conferring them an ability to tap for mana yet. This is because they don't have any basic land types after all. So she is making them lands, but they don't give you any resources the way that you would expect most lands to do. That, though, is why 68% of players so far are running Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, which gives all lands the forest type so that now those artifact lands can tap for mana. Really cool trick. I'd like to suggest, in addition to this, that you also maybe consider Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, the original version of Yavimaya, which does the same thing as Yavimaya, but it makes everything into also swamps, not also forests. This is showing up in 21% of Toph decks, according to the data that we have right now, and that, I think, could stand to increase. Famously, since Urborg doesn't have any color pips on it, it actually can be run in non-black decks. It's a little bit weird looking, but it can actually work. So it is even playable in a Naya deck, such as this one. This land will basically function for you in this deck like a colorless land that will also happen to give your artifacts mana tapping capabilities when your commander's in play. And I know that I would love to run a land that also happens to say, if your commander is in play, all of your artifacts tap for mana now. I think that's pretty darn cool. So those numbers could go up. As a quick note, Urborg is a spendy card right now, but I think if you're playing Toph and you're doing gross metal bending stuff already, I don't know, this interaction is cool enough to me that I imagine it's going to be fine to proxy this one personally. I think I should clarify, come to think of it, the reason this challenge was on my mind in the first place is because recently I made a video about the hybrid mana debate, link in the description. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. The internet seems to like that video a whole lot. And given that in that video I discussed the aesthetic ramifications of the current color identity rules and the ramifications of those rules potentially changing, I think I should mention again that this Urborg hack that we all have access to here, it's pretty weird, right? Mm-hmm. And people might interpret me recommending using this trick here as also being weird, given what was discussed in that video. So let me just clarify that my goal here in Challenge the Stats is always going to be to help you find cool tricks to level up your deck with what you have access to. So if this is how things currently work, I just want to make sure that people out there know a thing that they could use that would make their deck better. I hope that goal, I hope that all makes sense. Mm-hmm. Regardless, I hope that this is a fun thing for folks who are building Toph to have on their radar about trying out some cards that can give your artifacts the ability to give you more resources.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of getting more and more resources. And speaking of more resources, if you like the cards that we've talked about today, you can pick up some resources of your own by heading over to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast. Cardsphere is one of our favorite ways of picking up cards. I recently got a big package of cards for a new brew that I have coming up, so I'm very excited to get these cards in my hands as soon as possible. And Cardsphere has just been one of the best ways to do that. And it's just great for turning all these old cards that I'm not playing anymore into cards I'm going to play. So if you would like to try out Cardsphere for yourself, head over to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast and get started trading today.
I actually also just got something in from Cardsphere. I got this Kodama of the West Tree, which I'm really looking forward to because I plan on building Toph decks of my own, and that card's going to be really good in those decks. So I'm already preparing.
Seems like a no-brainer there. Yeah, good call, Joey.
I just got that in and I'm really excited. I'm like, yay, it just came in. Anyway, okay. Let's move to the next part of our show here, Matt. We talked about some stuff that we kind of want to avoid when it comes to that last game of the night. We've only got 50 minutes to play or whatever. But avoiding things, that's one thing. There's also, what do you actively look for when it comes to those? What are the decks that you are leaning more towards because of what they contribute to the game, not just because of what they don't contribute to the game, like we already covered earlier. So let's get started with that. Where do you start when it comes to that situation?
So when it comes to, we have 50 minutes to get a game in, I automatically go to a deck that is going to be proactive in its own game plan. That is the number one consideration I give. Is I'm not going to play decks, like we said, that sit back, kind of accrue value, maybe play the control strategy. I'm going to be on the front foot the entire game. That is the number one consideration that I give when I'm looking at what deck am I going to play if we have a time limit.
Yeah, completely. Lots of cards that make number go down is kind of the thing here. An example that I'll put forward for this would be, for instance, like a Rakdos Punisher deck. I'm thinking like Lord of Pain. everything that you're playing, there's damage that is happening. Life totals are just melting all around you, including your own, in fact. Like, even something like that, it's just like, oh, cool, I don't care if my own life total is super high. That's the type of thing that I 100% would proactively reach for because of how much it is pushing the narrative of the game forward. It is actively seeking that endpoint.
Havocfestival.deck basically is what we're playing.
There you go. Yeah, that's a really, really good example for sure. I'll also throw one in here too, though. I'd mentioned sort of, quote, linchpin status as a thing that I would want to be sensitive to. I think resiliency does have a bit of an ingredient in here for me too. I don't want to play a deck that can be felled by like a single board wipe and then I'm just out of it and I'm just stuck top decking for a while and I'm not able to push the game forward as much. So I think I would also end up looking for decks that are able to rebuild really easily after setbacks. That's another ingredient in this for me too, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like you don't want to just fold and then go back into kind of the downfalls of it we talked about, where one card, that silver bullet, kind of answers everything about your strategy. You want to have a couple angles of attack when you're trying to, go about whatever you're trying to do. And so, not being able to be absolutely crushed just by one card existing in the game, that makes a huge difference, because that means then there's 4 players trying to end the game instead of 3 players and then 1 like observer in the game. That makes a world of difference too, and just making sure that the games move at the pace that you typically want them to go to when you're trying to get one last game. And especially, and I know I keep saying this, especially when you're on a time crunch, if you have a certain out time, the store's closing, whatever, play something that just doesn't fold and leads to inactivity by any given player.
And kind of coupled with that too, could also just be like, if you have an awareness of a diversity of win conditions within your deck, like you were saying, you don't want to get shut down on one axis. Well, let's say that like if your deck only has combat as the only way that it can win, and then you're susceptible to more of those fear safety type of effects or whatever, compared to if you have a little bit of extra ability in the deck somewhere to also make life totals go down through non-combat damage effects. Even just having an extra couple of things like that in your pocket could prevent you from being stalled out on the board and have you find another way to hit the dome in some other fashion. And even just having that a little bit locked and loaded before the game even begins could be the kind of thing that helps you push towards an endpoint if one avenue happened to be shut down, even incidentally.
Well, and a good way to make sure that you're like, whatever you're trying to do and whatever backup strategies you might have, a good piece that makes for a good last game of the night type of deck is just anything that has a lot of card advantage in general. I know that we say that in like, you should always build card advantage in your deck. And so this is kind of a no-brainer, but the decks that maybe overemphasize that just to make sure you're seeing as many cards as you can and getting access to whatever that win condition might be. A good example for me is my Shanid Sleeper Scourge deck, where that literally is play a card, draw a card, play a card, draw a card. And so making sure that I always have access to 5 or more cards in my hand, that's incredibly valuable when it comes to I'm trying to just get the game over with, which means I need to see as many cards as possible and spending as much mana every turn as possible.
Yeah.
So having that just built-in card advantage into the command zone, that makes a huge world of difference.
I especially like that example because Shanid as well gives a lot of your stuff menace. Cool, making it harder for your opponents to block your stuff. And it's not just that it's drawing you cards. It's drawing you cards, and I believe you lose a life, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so it's draw a card, lose a life. It's Phyrexian Arena, but whenever I do anything.
Whenever you cast those legendary spells or play those legendary lands. Yeah, so that's another ingredient here too. That's not a deck that is being precious with its life total. It's not on a defensive back foot from the off. It's actually kind of like, yeah, I'll go for it. It's playing a little bit more risky, perhaps, is a way that we could say it. That might be an ingredient I would look for too. I don't care so much about like preserving my stuff so much here, my life total especially. I'll play a little bit fast and loose, because fast and loose can be the kind of thing that actually helps you reach the end game point a little bit more quickly. So I think she needs a perfect example of this.
Yeah, well, and any deck that kind of just, it dares your opponents to finish you off.
Sure.
Like that's absolutely, because it leads to these stories like, I can look somebody in the eye, like I could be at 10 life or whatever, like I dare you to do it. And then like just because I've been drawing 20 cards over the course of 5 turns, well, okay, yeah, I'm just going to kill your thing because I found the answers to make sure I can still win. So like it just being able to draw so many cards, and like a low life total does so many weird things socially to a game of Magic, especially in Commander. Like it gives people like some bravado, almost like I'm going to get real bold right here. Watch me go. And I love those moments too. And those make for some really good stories to cap off the end of a night too.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned before, no one likes their night to end on a sour note. So if you are reaching for something that has a win con that feels exciting, I do think that that's another thing to lean towards for sure. I kind of want to combine two of the points that we just mentioned about like the card advantage, the extra stuff that you're injecting into the ecosystem of the game, as well as like the proactivity of it, the extra damage that it's getting. An example that pops to my mind here would be actually the card Sergeant John Benton, which is a Selesnya commander that when it hits an opponent, you and that opponent each draw that many cards. And it's even got haste and some like keywords that like you can suit this up. And that's putting a lot more cards into the game. But by doing so, it's also putting a lot of more damage into the game, too. So it is, I think, really doing that almost like Descent into Avernus type of play, where, yes, I'm dealing damage, but I'm also giving you resources. Yeah, this is like a Selesnya version of that. Like, yes, I'm giving you damage, but also here's some cards. Like, no one's ever going to be stuck top decking if that deck is doing some stuff at the table. So those are some other things that I'm looking at in this conversation that I think combine some of the elements we just mentioned.
Those two cards are such perfect cards to play if you're just trying to like build up to a story and do it quickly. I love that. Descent into Avernus, especially like the just like again, Havoc Festival, those types of cards that like we know what we're doing, so beat it or don't. I love those just because like they make sure the game goes quickly. They make sure that everybody's gonna have a chance to do a lot of stuff too. So I love those cards when it comes to have a chance to like just move the game forward and create these weird situations that you don't get into when you like think of the typical game.
Yeah. If it was just we draw a lot of cards or we get a lot of treasures, yes, that does like move some things forward. But the fact that it's also tethered to some damage in there too is just like, perfect. You're hitting both of these beats at the same time, which really helps with the tempo of where we're trying to get things to go. So
there's an expiring
before the shop is done. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an expiring clock type of situation where like, yes, you get these things, but you have to do it quick. Otherwise, like you're going to run out of time. The Doomsday Clock scenarios and those types of cards, I really love that category in general for last games of a given session.
Yeah. And then another thing too, which you had been kind of hinting at before as well, that I really want to grab onto here would be, I guess like the clean, direct end games rather than like convoluted end games. Like I think if you have a group of cards in the deck that you can just easily point to and be like, these are win conditions, that also is helpful. An example that I'll put forward here would be my Thalys deck, which is the plan is just so simple of just like, I make a lot of tokens, I have a lot of bodies in play, and then I play something that pumps them up and I go rawr. Like that my turns are just, here's a thing, here's a bunch of cardboard that I made now, and if they survive till next turn, maybe I can play something that is going to pump them all up and then I attack. Those turns don't take me a whole lot of time to execute upon. It's just like, here's stuff and here it goes, and I have a whole group of cards that is just like my win condition, my oomph section, and having a deck that I have this like dedicated, I know this is my oomph category and I know I have several cards that contribute to the oomph. I think that is the kind of thing that I would actively be searching for when it comes to the final game of the night.
Well, it's those are the types of decks like your Thalys deck. It's decks that you can play on like a chess clock. Like you make your move and you pass the turn and like the clock, the timer starts. Exactly. My Jetmir deck is the exact same thing. So Jetmir next to Rebels, because that's my Heir Apparent deck where I cast a Heir Apparent and I pass the turn. Next turn, I cast 2 Heir Apparents and I pass the turn. Next turn, I do one more spell and then I kill somebody. Like those types of things, like it's straightforward. It's fairly resilient. Like I've played against your Thalys deck a few times too, and like it doesn't die to one board wipe. You need to be constantly looking because you're constantly making tokens. Same way as like Naya decks have gotten really good at kind of recovering or preventing board wipes from happening. So it's actually a fairly resilient deck. So, and it's super clean. I play 5 or 6 bunnies, and then I play my commander, or I play some overrun effect. It's simple, and it's a fantastic deck to play in these situations where like we have a timeline, we got to play pretty quick. Great, I'm pulling out Jetmir, everybody playing bracket 3, bracket 4, let's go.
Yeah. A thing that it occurs to me, when we were putting some stuff together for this show, it occurs to me like it's easy to pull like, okay, Rakdos Punisher decks. Of course, everyone's life total is going to be going down, or like these big punchy decks or whatever. But there are certain color combinations that it feels like more often lend themselves to control. I'm thinking Azorius here. Let's call it spade a spade.
We look decks. Sideways at those guys.
Yeah, famously, it's like Azorius tends to be the type of thing that is going to be a little bit more on the controlling side and the less proactive side most of the time, just like on average compared to a lot of other color combinations. So I was looking around for what's a good example of an Azorius deck that I do think has this proactive feeling to it. And I would put forward Millicent, which is the White Blue Spirits commander. if you've ever played against that one, it generates a whole lot of bodies very, very quickly. And then you've got a lot of stuff that is pumping up each of those spirits. So I think it punches really hard. But not only that, I think it also does a really nice job of recovering after setbacks too. So in terms of like, if you're looking at Exorius examples, I think that serves as a really good one to kind of illustrate the point that this is still a thing that every color combination can indeed meet. It just, there are certain things that on average you might be veering away from a little bit, but that doesn't mean the color combination doesn't have access to those types of things that can indeed feel this proactive.
You say Azorius is the slow color combination. I see your blue and I raise you another blue and play Dimir. I don't know how Dimir typically closes games pretty quickly.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, because I'm not playing zombies like you and like 7 different flavors, Joey. But then you look at stuff like Eureka, which like that actually is able to
there you go.
To dome the table unilaterally pretty quickly to really like make a dent in the table. So there are different ways that, you know, if you're playing Dimir and you're not playing zombies, you still can get the job done and get it done quickly.
Yeah, I think Eureka's like lightning fast strategy that really melts life totals very quickly. And I think that there are plenty of other, you know, very famous, you know, even just an elf ball deck. Well, that can be pretty darn fast. But, you know, again, make sure that you're not being felled by a single board wipe. Or like, let's be honest, Krenko. Like that's going to be probably also very, very fast. But it's good to look for those and not just the obvious, you know, red places or the obvious green places. It's nice to be aware of them in those other color combinations too. And Eureka, I think, is a great example for the Dimir stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's no Xenagos. It's no Gruul, go fast, stomp people with trample. But it does a pretty good job. I'll give it credit where it's due.
Xenagos is actually a fantastic example, particularly because, again, on the, quote, resiliency point, Xenagos doesn't care necessarily about any individual creature that you've played. Every turn, it's capable of posing a new threat. And it's a meaningful threat. It's just like, all right, here's a new problem. And it never feels like I can't get back into the game. So like that's actually a really good energy to point out here too. Really good example. I like that. Yeah, the turns are very short. It's play, swing, you know? So
play, move to combat. Are you dead? No. Okay, pass turn.
Yeah. So those were a couple of other, you know, examples and a couple of points that we reached for. We've mentioned some examples that aren't our own, but, you know, it does kind of beg the question from our own roster here. What are other things that might fit this? You mentioned like Shanid and Jetmir. Are there other decks in your roster that you also think that you have a good energy for at the last game of the night type of deal?
So one deck that I know we kind of talked about, like, is it playgroup dependent or not, is combo. But like if we're playing a high power, okay, we got a quick game, we don't have a whole lot of time. I really like my Noctis list when it comes to it's a combo deck. It's very fast. It tries to just get to what it's trying to do. If we're playing with the higher brackets and higher power levels, Noctis is a really, really good solution. We played with a group of friends. We had a kind of a retreat. You and I did, and I played my Noctis list like towards the end of the night because like, okay, everyone wants to play a high power deck, but we want to get a pretty quick game in because we have something going on here in an hour that we need to leave for. And Noctis really did a good job at doing that, where it wasn't turbo CEDH, you know, comboing out on turn like 3, but like I'll give people till turns 5 and 6 where like, okay, we have a chance to respond, we have a chance to kind of set up, and I'm not stopping people from doing anything and participating, but I do tell people pretty bluntly, like, I'm trying to win via combo and I have a bunch of different ways to do it. So like, stop me or don't.
Yeah. Okay. I love that example. Because of the cleanliness of the ending there. That's a really good, like that win condition is pretty darn definitive.
And it's not a combo that leads into a different synergy. It's a combo that like it wins on its own. And I have very replaceable pieces in that too. So like, that's the thing. It's redundancy, it's resilient, but also like I don't like if somebody plays a rest in peace, I still have ways to win. So it doesn't just fold to one piece. So like that's why I really, really like my Noctis list because it does a lot of different things on different angles. But what about you, Joyce? Are there any other decks that you wanted to shout out as these are really good for the end of the night type of decks?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned like a Rest in Peace, which is a silver bullet for a whole lot of my decks. Let's be honest, I play a lot of graveyards.
It's true.
But regardless of that, I will still put, I think, a graveyard example forward. Like my Vohar deck, I actually realized was very, very quick. That is a Merfolk Looter in the command zone, and it discards some 9-drop, and then I use classic Reanimator effects to just get those 9-drops right into play right away. And by like turn 3 or 4, I'm already punching with a 9/9. That gets the game off on a pretty accelerated foot. I immediately pose myself as a bit of an issue. And it can take a while for people to like find the proper silver bullet that will be able to, handle me, to stop me. So the speed at which that one pulls threats out is, I think, a pretty good example. And then I actually also just recently built a Celeste deck, or Celeste, the Mardu commander, who wheels your hand when it enters. Like you discard a number of cards and then draw that many +1, which is a crazy amount of text. And I'm just like, cool. And my entire hand is in the graveyard now. And then I built that deck to be a bunch of creatures that revive other creatures. It's like Metamorphosis Fanatic into a Sun Titan reviving a Necromancy to then get me back this angel that brings back another angel. And all the while, Celeste is actually also giving +1 counters to each of my creatures whenever I revive stuff out of the graveyard. Which I said, a whole lot of +1 counters that can be Fiddly or whatever. But this is like, I didn't just revive a couple of 5/5s. Now all of my army is huge, and on my next turn, watch out. And if my stuff does get set back, I have a lot of graveyard recursion to potentially get those things back, and Celeste can also wheel my hand to refill my graveyard pretty darn easily. So I've noticed that one also tends to have a pretty good tempo of just constantly beating this drum that is going to move towards, hey, I'm going to be an issue still. And it has enough resiliency, rest in peace notwithstanding, it has enough resiliency to usually still set a very meaningful tempo for the rest of the game.
Well, and even like you said, even if a rest in peace happens, if the game gets to turns 7, 8, whatever, casting 9-drops every turn is just going to get there. That is one positive thing about my Vivictus Asmati deck, where it's not great because of all the game action has to take, but eventually, like if Vivictus goes away, eventually I'm going to get to 8 mana and I just cast 8 drops every single turn. Same thing for your Vohar deck. Like it has a backup plan. It's not ideal, but casting an 8-drop every turn, like eventually people are going to run out of resources.
Yeah, if I get there, my default backup plan strategy is still big beasties. So
big monsters.
Yeah. So I think that those are some examples of things that I would at least start off by looking at, especially because they don't have like a linchpin status, quote unquote, to them. I think that a lot of people probably expected me to like put Conrad forward as an example here, but I worry sometimes that he's he's drawing a lot of attention to himself. It is very much a linchpin. Like he's the source of the damage. So if people knock him out, do I have enough other things in that deck that will allow damage to continue even if he's not there? I go back and forth on that. I tinker with that deck a whole lot. So that's why I didn't put that forward as an example. It's the kind of thing that I would want to make sure that I'm aware of. How is it that I've tuned this deck before I definitively decide, yes, this will be a good final game of the night type of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I really like this conversation because it's something that happens. I mean, ideally every single game or every single time that you get together with friends. And so being able to take into account like the first and the last game of every session, it's something super important. So I'm glad we got to set some time aside to really talk about it, because it is something that, I think people can always get a little bit better about managing these social situations. And it's something that comes up a lot.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to have an awareness of what's available to you in your roster so that when you do get into those situations, you know that you're properly equipped to actually hit that deadline that everyone said that they want to hit, so that you can finish up the game before the store closes, or you can make sure you catch your bus or to get back home or stuff like that. So these are all little things that even just a slight bit more attentiveness to, a little bit more awareness of, can actually end up going a whole long way. So this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for it, Matt. I'm glad that you're back from your honeymoon so that we can talk about cardboard rectangles.
I'm glad that I'm back. I'm a little sad that I'm not more tan, but that's just the life that I live. So here we are. Maybe you can fool everybody and color correct me to looking a little more luminescent.
Luminescent, careful. I might turn you bright purple, man.
Okay, let's not go that far. All right.
All right. With that, let's call this episode to a close. Listeners, we have got to know what qualities make a deck fun for you to play at the end of the night. What are the things that make a deck super successful in that situation or not? Let us know your thoughts. And Matt, if our listeners want to get in touch with us on the onlines, where is it that they can find you, dude?
Well, you can find me on Instagram if you want to see pictures of me in, paradise, honeymooning, wedding stuff. There's pictures over there if you're curious, at Mathimus55. But any social media platform, you can find me over there. And don't forget, we are proud to work with Dragon Shield, some of the best sleeves, accessories. If you need to get organized and scan your collection in, they have a great card scanner over there too. So check out Dragon Shield for all of your card management needs.
And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky at Joseph M. Schultz. And you can find the cast online at EDHRECast. And of course, if you'd like to get access to things like exclusive content, you can support us over on patreon.com/EDHRECast. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.